Perfect. Okay, good. Yes, okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It looks like good morning, good afternoon by now. Wonderful to have you all here, and thank you for attending our panel. As we will reveal soon with our four brilliant students, my co-director and I, Dr. Christian, who couldn't be here today, I've been working for the last couple of years on a larger health equity lab. Part of what the lab does, what we'll talk about today, the other part is looking at disparities in Black maternal health and childbearing, which is a different project but under the same umbrella. And so there are numerous fellows within the lab. We've had a number of folks throughout the last couple of years doing important research, thinking about linking their own interests to questions of health equity, particularly disparities in African American healthcare historically, so in the past, but also in the present. And so we're going to hear a little bit about that today. As I mentioned, we have four young, brilliant scholars, which were supposed to be five. We actually, unfortunately, we're down one person. One of our fellows, unfortunately, was unable to join us. She got sick last minute. But I think we'll still have a robust discussion because even with one person down, the intellectual power of house that we have before us is going to, I think, be very impressive. So we are very proud of them and all their hard work. And you all will hear more about their projects throughout our presentation today. And we're looking forward to a robust discussion afterwards. With that said, I'll turn it over to our student fellows.
Hi, thank you so much for coming and wanting to listen to our presentation. We are presenting on the East Marshall Street Well, Oral History and Memorialization Project today. And we are all from Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond.
So the Zoom people can hear you. You have to speak into the microphone at the podium.
One sec, there's also a handheld right here. You guys can use. You should be good to go.
Perfect, thank you. Hello. My name is Arya Hanjagi. I am a junior at VCU. This is my third year in the Health Humanities Lab. I am a biology major with minors in chemistry, psychology, and general business on the pre-med track. Our other fellow who could not unfortunately be here today is Ashley Burks. She's a first-year Health Humanities Lab student. She is a senior graduating this year with a studying psychology and African American studies with a minor in Health Humanities.
Hello, I am Victoria Vidal. I am currently a sophomore at VCU. This is my first year as part of the Health Humanities Lab, and I am currently studying biology with minors in chemistry and business on the pre-dental track.
Hi everyone, my name is Maryam Shaw. I'm also a first year Health Humanities Lab fellow. I'm majoring in interdisciplinary studies, specifically health humanities and the history of science, technology, and medicine studies. And I'm also on the pre-med track.
Hello everyone, I'm I-Kamilah Hiwott. I am a third year Health Humanities Lab student, and I am a senior graduating this year studying African American studies and history.
Okay, so we're all Health Humanities Lab fellows. We're working on the East Marshall Street Well Project, Oral History and Memorialization Project in Virginia Commonwealth University's Health Humanities Lab. Dr. Cynn and Dickinson right there are co-directors, and we're working to basically develop a memory and history of the East Marshall Street Well and the narrative surrounding it. And we especially want to emphasize the connection between history and historical racism and the present health inequities we see today.
So as we begin this presentation, we do want to provide a content and trigger warning that our presentation will contain both descriptions and depictions of anti-Black medical racism and mistreatment of human remains. So some of these images that you may see will be troubling. As we begin this presentation, we will first begin with just a contextualization of the history of what the East Marshall Street Well Project is. We will then dive into our initiatives that we're currently working on, as well as plans that we have for the future in relation to the project, as we will talk about.
Okay, so to understand the importance of memorialization, I'm going to give you guys a bit of history of the well. And so this is the VCU health system in Richmond. And in the 1840s, Hampden-Sydney College decided to build a medical department in Richmond, which ultimately turned into MCV or VCU Health. And Richmond was a prime location for them to build their medical department because it was a slave capital and it had then like an abundance of bodies and this easily exploitable population. And the supply of human cadavers was insufficient for increasing classes of medical students and their new like experience-based curriculum. So this led to the illegal procurement of cadavers by grave robbing. And once the cadavers were no longer of use, they were haphazardly discarded into nearby wells meant to be hidden forever. And on the slide right here, this excerpt from a newspaper, it's sort of a advertisement for the medical college. And this highlighted portion, it says, the abundance of materials for anatomical purposes and the reduced price at which they are furnished will enable the student to acquire an intimate knowledge of the anatomy of the human body and the use of surgical instruments. And they sort of like took pride in the fact that they had these anatomical, like these cadavers for their use. And you can see that in this photo. These are all medical students. They're wearing like and you can tell they are medical students because they're wearing the proper attire and they sort of seem proud to be seen next to this body, even though it was procured in such a terrible way. And this process was covered up by medical faculty and contained within the Egyptian building, which was the first permanent home of the Hampden-Sydney Medical Department. Basically, they needed a specific space and created for medical education. So they built this building, and the Egyptian style was chosen because of like the deep roots that Egypt has with the origins of medicine that went back to this Egyptian physician. I think his name was Imhotep. Then in 1994, VCU School of Medicine was building a new building called the Hermes A. Contos building for medical sciences next to the historical Egyptian building. And as construction workers were preparing for the site, they discovered a well of human bones and remains underground, which at the location of the St. Philip's East Hospital, which was once a segregated hospital for African-American patients, which was also used to be near the Egyptian building. And this is a photo of the day they found the well. And these are like the people that were working near it. And just to like provide some contextualization, this is a map of Richmond. This circle right here is like the capital. That's where MCV is situated. And that's where the Egyptian building is currently. And next to it is the new Contos building. And that's where the East Philip East Hospital used to be. And then in this general area, this area marked by a rectangle, that is Shockoe Bottom, which was the second largest slave market in the US. So you can see that they're very close. And then the VCU Archaeological Department wanted to perform a full excavation and analysis of the remains they found so that they can be preserved in their current condition. But the university administrators overseeing the construction, they pushed for a rapid dig, and they just continued to build over the remains that were under there. So whatever remains were salvaged from the excavation were cleaned and categorized by the Archaeological Center staff, and they were sent to the Smithsonian for additional analysis in the same summer. And from the analysis, it was found that the remains were from 50 mostly African-American or African people who were probably enslaved. And overall, this was a very disrespectful and messy crude exhumation, which was left undiscussed until 2011, and these remains were not returned until 2019. So according to some of the accounts that of the people that were at the site, they said it was just horrendous to see like the construction over these remains and just the remains being pulled from the ground by these machines. And these accounts will be shown on the next slide. And because it was rushed, it's very possible that there are still some bodies and remains under the contest building today. So this is a documentary trailer. In 2011, Dr. Sean Utsi, who is a professor at VCU, he made this documentary about the well. It's called Until the Well Runs Dry, and it sort of pushed the history of the well back into a spotlight and reopened a conversation and made people remember the well. And I'm going to play the trailer. It's 5 minutes long.
I was at the age of maybe 10 or 12, and like the kids playing in the yard, my parents would say,
"Don't go near MCV on the other side of the viaduct."
The student doctors from the hospital comes around and get you and put you in some kind of wagon or something and carry your MCV and experiment on your body.
One other incident that I heard, somebody had come up missing, a black woman, and nobody never investigated to find out what had happened to her. But it was assumed that one of the student doctors at MCV had got her.
It was just like a saying, or like just a general warning of the old folks, in that area, hey, at nighttime, you don't go across the viaduct bridge.
Non-native Richmonders, when hearing these stories, might at first be inclined to dismiss them as mere folklore. However, in 1996, an archaeological discovery of human remains at the Medical College of Virginia provided evidence that the accounts given by these native Richmonders were grounded in a historical reality.
I was asked to go down and look at some possible archaeological remains at MCV next to the Egyptian building where some construction was going on for a new facility for the medical college. There was an old well there, and the well was essentially filled with various kinds of artifacts, but primarily human bones. It was pretty obvious to me that we were looking at a mid-19th century repository of cadaver remains. Later on, we had most of the human remains at least studied briefly by forensic anthropologists at the Smithsonian Institution, and the report came back that they were virtually all those of African American people.
So folklore becomes truth. The human remains found in the well outside of the Medical College of Virginia shed light on the existence of an industry that once flourished in Richmond, the trade in human cadavers for medical dissection. And the person responsible for this well, for the acquisition, keeping, and disposal of the human remains used in this way, was a Black Richmonder named Chris Baker.
Chris Baker was the anatomical attendant at the Medical College of Virginia from some point probably in the 1870s until he died in 1919. And it was his job to prepare the cadavers for the students to dissect, as well as to bring out anatomical specimens to either the demonstrator of anatomy or the professor of anatomy. Chris Baker received pavement, as did other individuals who the college hired over the years to procure bodies. Of course, at this time it was illegal to procure these bodies. We are aware, because he was subsequently arrested in the 1880s, that he did in fact go out on raids himself.
Historically, grave robbing has been of two kinds. Both were for profit, but when this profit became a part of the chain of justifications for sacrificing Black bodies to the higher aims of science, a truly perverse ego of entitlement was created in the practitioners of medicine.
Medical College of Virginia catalog, they would brag that they had clinical material, dissecting material, readily available in the city of Richmond, so that students would be attracted to come there because they knew that they could do dissection, that bodies were there.
Medical dissection is customary today. All or nearly all medical students have to dissect a human cadaver. It's, in a way, a kind of rite of passage as it's developed over time, but it's also an essential way to understand the inner workings of the human body.
You in the hospital, you the doctor, and where you got your prestige was how many cadavers you had been into. That determined. It's like, how many home runs did you hit? Well, cadavers was the medicine. What home runs is the baseball.
There was clearly a racial disparity in the procurement of human cadavers for use in the anatomical labs of medical colleges in the United States. Given the widespread belief in the inferiority of African descent people, including physical differences between blacks and whites that were believed to exist, why would grave robbers target African American cemeteries to feed the trade in human cadavers?
That's the $64,000 question. Why were all of these cadavers studied by these students black?
I was at the age of maybe.
Thank you for watching that clip. I know it's a little, hard to digest, but we actually wanted to make sure we talk about our Family Representative Council. So VCU actually initiated reconciliation efforts to acknowledge and address its history of medical racism. As a part of this process, the university has helped establish a Family Representative Council, which represents the descendant community and provides recommendations for the respectful study, memorialization, and reburial of the individuals whose remains were discovered in the well. This project seeks to amplify the council's objectives by honoring and memorializing the victims of VCU's medical exploitation. The East Marshall Street Well Project is committed to honoring and properly memorializing over 50 African and African American individuals whose remains were uncovered on the MCV campus in 1994. These individuals who were used as medical cadavers in the 19th century and discarded without dignity. The Family Representative Council has proposed key recommendations to guide research, memorialization, and interment efforts. These initiatives include memorialization, which means for us creating physical memorials at VCU, establishing an annual remembrance event for medical students, and providing and developing policies for handling future discoveries. Interment. Proper burial of the remains of the African burial ground in Richmond following the traditional West African funerary practices and research. Ensuring the community's input in all studies, prioritizing non-destructive methods, and exploring the remains' genetic and historical significance. Efforts are ongoing with committees and actively working on these specific initiatives, recognizing this history is a crucial step towards healing and rebuilding the trust between the Black community and the healthcare system.
As part of the efforts to enact recommendations around memorialization, the HHL, which is our lab, is producing oral histories with interviews conducted by Professor Anna Edwards, who is a well-known public historian and community activist. She's actually pictured over here on the left image. And on the right is an image of her actually conducting one of these interviews in a studio with Dr. Michael Blakey. By the end of spring semester 2025, so in a few months, we are planning to complete around 30 of these oral histories, including interviews with FRC members, VCU administrators, and other academics and community members who were involved in the discovery and return of the remains from the Smithsonian. These oral histories, along with transcriptions of them that us lab students are going to process, will be uploaded onto a VCU library's website, and they will be permanently stored and publicly accessible. Additionally, there are other initiatives that we have been working on as well. So pictured here is a digitization of 4 large panels that were made to show the critical points of the history of the well. On the left, we have 1844, which is, I think, the 8th semester that the medical college was running, and that was around the time that they predict the well was created and the bodies were used and discarded in the well, although this could have started much earlier and gone much later. In 1994 is the discovery of the well, which we discussed in past slides. In 2011, that is when Dr. Utsi's documentary came out and brought attention back to the well. And consequently, in 2013, that was when the FRC was founded, but in 2019 is the year that the remains were returned from the Smithsonian back to VCU. So again, our project that is centering the memorialization includes more than just the oral histories. One of them is the panels that I just showed in the last slide, a policy for human remains, basically what to do if and when there is a next time that more remains and wells are found under the VCU or MCV campus, because looking at evidence and documentation from the time that the Hampden-Sydney College was open, there is a good chance that there were more wells that just have not been found yet. We have created an exhibit on the 4th floor of James Branch Cabell Library on the VCU Monroe Park campus, pictured here on the left, which includes anecdotes and artifacts from the well. Along with that, we have taken on updating and keeping up to date the website for the East Marshall Street well, making sure that all of the current events that are happening that included are on the website. Podcasting, which is also shown here on the right. That's actually one of our other fellows, Olivia Washington, with one of our past fellows, Michael Berner, recording an episode for a podcast in our podcasting studio. It's meant to be a conversational take to explain the well with an audience targeted towards other students and Richmond community members who may not know about it, and to include student perspectives on it. Other than that, there is a walking tour going on. It's a digital walking tour that is meant to highlight all of the landmarks in Richmond that were part of the history of the well and continue to have significance to it today, as well as repatriation efforts, including memorialization, reburial of the bodies, and creating a memorial site.
And through our commitments to uphold recommendations on memorialization and intentional collaborations on this project, the East Marshall Street Well Project's various community engagement initiatives binds the transdisciplinary methods of this project with the community entrenched with the burden of this painful history. In the process of implementing and fostering community partnerships, the fellows have had the opportunity of presenting panels and facilitating discussions on the research and background of the project. As the fellows participated in various conferences, discussions, and events on the research, the recording of oral histories were conducted to display the community experiences on the injustices committed to the early Black Richmond population, creating space to uphold community relationships and the impact of their experiences. Through these events and community-focused discussions, students and the Richmond community can forge relationships dedicated to acknowledging the historic medical mistrust between the African-American Richmond community as well as MCV. And here in the next slide, we have some images of fellows at some events showcasing their research and their experience within the lab. And in the image right up top here, you can see me where I am presenting at the Comrade M. Hall Symposium on Virginia History at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. And this opportunity was specifically special for me because it allowed for students to sharpen their professionalism and their presentation skills and also connect with the Richmond community.
Okay, so as can be seen up on the slide, in 1968, MCV, which is the Medical College of Virginia, performed the South's first human-to-human heart transplant. And this was done by using the heart of Bruce Tucker, a Black man, to save the life of a white businessman. Though it was and still is hailed as a medical breakthrough for the technical pros of it, the procedure was carried out under entirely illegal and unethical circumstances. Neither Tucker nor his family had given the consent for the use of his heart and essentially his organ donation. His body, like those that were found in the well, demonstrate the systemic exploitation of Black communities for medical research and, again, medical malpractice. Tucker's case happened just over 50 years ago, so this is not far. And this continues to serve as a stark reminder that such injustices, as is with the well, are not a distant history. And up here again is an excerpt from the Richmond Times Dispatch, which is a newspaper depicting again who is Bruce Tucker, the heart donor who was identified. As for a more contemporary connection, again, that was only 50 years ago, so not that far. The University of North Texas, so they have a health science center that is attached to the university. And at the university, it was found that they had used over 830 unclaimed bodies for the use of medical research and again, the use of students and companies. And so in this situation, the definition of unclaimed bodies is that of people who were found by the county who were either they could not find loved ones for them, or they simply could not cover the cost of any kind of cremation or funeral processes for these loved ones. So these bodies were then taken from various counties across North Texas for medical education and external sales without the family's consent. This collected over the process of about 5 years. The bodies were then sold and dissected for generating about $2.5 million. This then led to the suspension of what at the time was called the Bioskills program at the university, the closure of the cadaver lab that primarily used these bodies across the university, and the resignation of the Science Center's president. It had gained enough attention to which she had resigned. And again, this provides kind of a highlight of a violation of rights and dignity of people even after death. And again, here's just kind of a post that summarizes what I just discussed. And in the next slide, we're going to get a first-hand account of a family who was actually affected by this and their loved one.
It was a lucrative business, a state medical school near Dallas making money by dissecting, studying, and exporting hundreds of unclaimed bodies. But after a nearly year-long investigation by NBC News, the school, which initially defended the practice, made a stunning reversal and suspended the program.
We were completely failed by the entire system.
Despite the change, for many of the families impacted, like Michael Coleman's, there's still so much left unanswered.
I used to cry all day, every day. Now I just cry at least once every day.
Coleman's fiance, Louisa, and his sisters, Shay and Tisha, spent months searching for him after he didn't come home. It turns out he had died, possibly hit by a car near his apartment. Within days, Michael Coleman's family began searching this neighborhood, even putting up missing persons flyers, all while Michael was languishing in a hospital just minutes away. But despite the family calling the hospital, calling police, calling the medical examiner's office, nobody connected the dots. When the family finally did, it was too late. The Health Science Center was already preparing his body for a 12 to 24-month study.
I told that lady, give his body back, and she's like, well, no, because he was donated to us, but he was wrongfully donated to y'all.
10 companies and medical schools that paid the university to use body parts have since told us they did not know those parts often came from unclaimed bodies. One of those companies, National Bioskills Laboratories, paid $900 for the torso of U.S. military veteran Victor Honey, who we told you about earlier this week.
Were you aware that your laboratory was using body parts of unclaimed people?
No, not at all. First time I heard about it was when NBC News contacted me. It says donated on the paperwork.
What did you think that meant?
That they donated their bodies for this purpose.
Are you going to change course in any way now knowing what you know?
Yes, absolutely. We need to know exactly who consented. I would like to know that.
While training on unclaimed bodies is legal in most of the country, many U.S. medical schools have halted the practice. A few states, including Hawaii, Minnesota, and Vermont, have outright banned it. But because no national data exists about how common it is, NBC News conducted its own survey, reaching out to 51 major medical schools in 29 states. 44 of them told us they don't use unclaimed bodies. The rest didn't answer.
What is the moral question here? What do we owe the dead? And what do we owe their loved ones?
Eli Shoup is a bioethicist advocating for a national ban.
Who is most likely to be deemed an unclaimed body?
People who die poor. These are marginalized communities who are being affected by this practice. A local med school has justified this practice to me in terms of it diversifying their cadaver lab. They'll come out and say, this is a great way for our students to get training on Black bodies. But I don't think that that's a feather in your cap if you've just taken that Black body.
Without consent.
Without consent. I think that in some sense it is modern day grave robbing.
That's exactly what Coleman's sisters feel happened to him. He was a Black man with a criminal record.
Do you think that the officials took your family seriously?
No, because of his past, because he's Black.
Officials with Dallas and Tarrant counties and the Health Science Center have declined NBC News' repeated requests for interviews. But just this week, after the university suspended its program and after NBC News aired the first part of this story, both counties held meetings addressing the failures. For Louisa,
he's just another body to them.
It's a step towards closure, but still, no justice.
He wasn't a missing person. He had family that loved him. He wasn't nothing. That's how they treated him, like he wasn't nothing, when he was everything to me.
Liz Kreutz, NBC News, Dallas.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social.
Medical mistrust in the Black community isn't just about isolated incidents. It's about a long-standing history of medical racism in the healthcare field that continues to have real implications today. VCU Health is part of this history, and its past practices have contributed to a deep-seated skepticism among Black patients. For generations, discriminatory treatment and unethical medical practices have made it difficult for many African Americans to trust healthcare providers. This mistrust isn't just a feeling. It has been reinforced by real harm that persists across generations, often discouraging people from seeking care even when they desperately need it. The consequences are serious and, in some cases, life-threatening. The East Marshall Street Well Project is a stark reminder of how racism has been embedded in the medical institutions that we use. It reveals how these systems have shaped cultural norms in harmful ways, often reinforcing same disparities that they claim to address. Stories like this one and the ones shared in this project help explain why so many Black Americans remain weary of medical institutions today. And given the abuse in history between Black communities and the healthcare system, that fear is completely valid. But at the same time, that fear can be different between the difference between life and death. No matter how advanced medical treatments become, they don't mean much if we just close the gap or don't trust our patients. Bridging that gap is essential to improving healthcare outcomes and ensuring a true well-being for all. The fight for equitable healthcare and justice for Black communities is exactly why these memorialization efforts matter. We're able to confront today's injustices because we remember, because those before us fought to preserve their stories. And that history can't be erased, rewritten by those in power. And protecting these narratives isn't about honoring the resilience of past generations and continuing the fight for justice. Memorialization isn't just about remembrance. It's an act of resistance and a demand for accountability. Thank you. And now we're going to transition over to our Q&A portion.
So I'm going to shuttle the mic around. So I'm going to bring it to the people asking questions. I'm going to bring it back up to the panel participants, and we'll just do that. I see you first question back here.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys can hear me, but you know the question, DNA. Are they going to perform any DNA testing on the bodies?
Yes, DNA analysis on the remains was taken on by a VC department, and it actually concluded, I think, last April of 2024, so fairly recently. And although I don't know exactly what their findings were, I know that they were, I think, able to identify some of the remains, not all of them that were found in the well. And because of that, they were able to move on with their internment efforts, such as reburial and moving on with the memorial site creation. because they did not want to do that until the bodies were released from DNA analysis.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question. Is there going to be any effort to find the descendants? Is there going to be a descendant project for the DNA?
That's a really good question. So part of the conversation is, of course, as Arya mentioned, is trying to figure out what we can about the remains, right? And so, the VCU has a forensics department, and in conjunction with William Mary, actually trying to look at, the historical evidence, artifacts, and et cetera, genders, life experiences of these folks. But your question about, descendants is a step further, right? And so it's a fascinating question, one that I think is worth asking, and has usually is asked in these circumstances. The other question, or the other part of that is, as Camilla mentioned in her slides, is the mistrust in Black communities, right? About giving away one's DNA, regardless of the purported measure, right? And so that is a conversation, literally, that is being had and has been had in descendant communities, right? Whether that is a step too far, and whether that's is something that should be counterbalanced against having a proper and sort of a speedy or a timely burial for these remains, right? And so that's a difficult conversation within these circumstances. Now, the FRC has decided that that's not something that they're interested in pursuing, and of course that is their decision. Other instances I know we think about, for example, and I know Georgetown, for instance, they have descendants of enslaved folks, right, and they're giving free tuition to their descendants, right, as sort of an efforts of reparation, right. So there are two sides to this issue, and of course that really speaks to the medical mistrust, right? Giving away my DNA for what purposes? And can I trust the purposes are going to be used correctly versus, letting institution off the hook, right? For what we could see as. So, these are complex issues, and these are conversations happening in descendants communities throughout the world. Plug quickly, there's actually an event on April 12th with descendant communities and roundtable at Virginia Commonwealth University that we're actually hosting. Our students will be presenting there as well. And so there will be a roundtable for multiple descendant communities around conversations like these. So you can sort of get different perspectives about how they feel about those larger questions. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yes, we can. Please.
Okay. Sorry to interject here. As I know I probably sound like I'm coming from outer space, but this is Cynn. I'm the co-director of the Health Humanities Lab, East Marshall Street Well, Oral History and Memorialization Project with Dr. Dickinson. And I just wanted to clarify too that the forensic research on the human remains that wasn't able to definitively identify families or names, the identities of the people whose bodies were found. So they were able to identify locations, general locations of where the people probably lived, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, in West and Central Africa. And then also they were able to determine disease, evidence of dissection actually on bones, etc. But the identities of the folks, of the people who were found, that was not established. And so the question of, genealogies, descendants, family who are still living in Richmond, that can't be answered from the research that has been done. So I just wanted to give a little bit of that context. Thanks.
Woman right there, and then I saw a couple other hands.
Yeah, good afternoon. I am the inaugural project director for Project Gabriel at VCU. And I just want to announce that VCU just yesterday dismantled its Office of Inclusive Excellence. So, there's that. These bones have been, they were exhumed 12 years ago. And it's taken just that long to start having a real conversation about internment. So I want to highlight that. They have not successfully ID'd any ancestors. From what I know about the process, it was somewhat limited. Like I am from Churchill, which is like probably a couple of miles or less from MCV. And I'm third generation Richmonder. Who knows if any of my ancestors could have been included in that? Well, I didn't know anything about genetic testing. And so, yeah, the Family Representative Council and the work of these students and Dr. Dickinson and Dr. Cynn, it has been important, but there are just too many, I think, unanswered questions. Yeah, I mean, and with the Bruce Tucker case with the heart, we don't even have evidence that he was actually going to die before his heart was taken. He had fallen off a wall and bumped his head, ended up in the hospital. Heart was gone. Family found out after the fact. And he still has direct descendants. Like he still has a son who is alive who, you know, generally doesn't want to talk about the situation. So there's a lot here that I think goes untold. Of course, it takes time to like actually find out the truth about these circumstances. But I think the bottom line is that at a time when people are threatening to cut funding for research on health disparities in this country, and actively in a state of denying that, you know, the situation is as bad as it is, and it's always been that way. These are very frustrating times.
I too, generations and generations from Churchill. I want to say that my great grandmother, who was a Churchill resident, was a midwife. And basically, in my family, this is anecdotal, in my family, VCU is, MCV or St. Philip's, as it was called then, was where you go to die. Don't go over there. You show the picture of the Viaduct Bridge that existed until the 70s. And basically, your little circle that you had drawn there, you need to include the fact that the viaduct connected to Churchill, which is a predominantly African-American community. So, hey, gentrification. So what I'm going to say is that I was born in 1960. My parents, we were in Churchill, living on Q Street. I was born at Richmond Memorial Hospital. Okay. My mother was determined that she was going to take heed to my great grandmother, and for a Black baby to be born at Richmond Memorial Hospital, which now does not exist, of course, it is Memorial Regional. That says a lot. So it is the mistrust is intergenerational and continues to exist.
Any other questions?
I was just going to ask, what was the state of the repercussions or the conversation around the well when it was discovered in 1994?
Yeah, so as we said in the slideshow, like the administration didn't they didn't care basically. Like they just pushed to build over it, even though they found out that there were remains. So I think people didn't really know, right? Is that true? It was sort of pushed under the rug at the time. So there were no repercussions, basically. Repercussions and this talk about the human remains policy, which hasn't been passed yet, but it was very hard it's hard work to try to pass that. Repercussions never really happened.
And like in this lab and through our work, we're trying to like push for some accountability like from VCU. And I think some, like there were two doctoral students that don't work here anymore. They moved away, but they were involved with policy, and it was very hard for them to do this work because VCU is very like, I don't think they want this policy to pass, or it's hard for, like basically what I'm saying is there were no repercussions.
Just kind of speaking on that as well when it comes to the repercussions of the uncovering of the well. So the actual uncovering of the well in 1994 was undertaken in 2 days. So the lack of care and dignity for the people who were uncovered is continually shown through the process of how uncovering the remains even went. But within our efforts of trying to rectify the past, which seems impossible due to the standard, I feel, of abuse against Black Richmonders that has happened systemically for as long as it has, we've tried to make sure that we hold a moment of silence before upcoming classes start the anatomical process of learning for their cadavers. These specific cadavers used today may not be, or obviously is not connected to the people uncovered underneath the Contos building, but showing that same respect by having a moment of silence, making sure that the students understand the humanity within the process of dissection is something that's been very, very, I feel like, instrumental within trying to rectify this issue. But yes, we understand there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of things that haven't been addressed, and with our student power and the way that we're doing research, we're trying to make sure that we allow for our university to understand that our students understand the history and the implications of what happened here. And I can speak for some of the people in the room who are from Richmond. I am real Richmond, born and raised, Churchill as well. And coming up in this community and being able to understand the reality of the history and the community that I come from, it's completely heartbreaking. As a young child, I said that I never wanted to go to VCU. I didn't realize why, but within my education and reframing, my relationship to my university, I have found power within trying to make these connections to people who don't understand what our project is, but are more curious to holding our university to those, standards of accountability, but also who are really dedicated to the tangible aspect of trying to rectify these issues. So within our role here as students, we're trying to do our hardest to make sure that we follow the recommendations, that we have our RC, which pretty much is that family. So I know someone had asked about the specific connection between finding alive relatives with the descendants of the people who were actually uncovered. But due to the process of that not being something upheld from the FRC's perspective, we're their family. I think that this is a situation in which all Richmonders are connected to the history in which this well uncovers, and specifically the university students have a strong, connection to making sure that these issues are rectified, but the connection is still maintained through understanding and disseminating the information within this history.
I have a comment and I have a question. My comment is, first of all, thank you for doing what you're doing. And my question, and you kind of touched on this, is how do you do this without becoming emotional? Because this I would be boiling all the time just doing all this.
Without the mic, because I know you come to play. For me, the biggest thing that I do is I talk to everybody. I don't shut up about this project. I don't quiet down the connection. Yes, I go to a university that is entrenched in some horrible things that happen to people who look exactly like me, who have the same genetic profile as me, who could very likely be related to me. One thing about this work that makes me so passionate to continue of being on this stage and being with my fellow mates or whatever, it's just the aspect that I have a responsibility. My life is the reason why these people, have a story. I'm not just here living for myself. I'm here to make sure that the narrative of these people who are unable to advocate for themselves is brought to the forefront. So within that, I take the responsibility of being the soldier for my ancestors and being the representation that these people deserve. I think everyone in this room would definitely feel if their families was in a situation just heartbroken by the lack of care and connection to the aspect of humanity, which Black people have historically described since the start of this nation. So for me, one thing I do to make sure that I connect to this project and greater implications outside of just my research as a student is by talking to my bus drivers, talking to the cashiers of the cafes on campus, being able to have these conversations with people who aren't even from this country so they can understand the historical reality of what it means to be a student at an institution in America and the responsibility these institutions have to the people in this country.
What Camilla said was so brilliantly worded. But like she said, I think a big part of this is not how do you not become emotional, but being emotional about this project is such a big part of it for us. I think because we are emotional is why we are able to carry out this work to the best of our ability. I think I can speak for all of us here when we say that this project transcends just like a part of our school day or a small part of our week. We do take this with us wherever we go with our peer groups and our classes or in our day-to-day lives where we can see the implications of what has happened. And we can really put that towards working on it and working towards the memorialization, all of the other efforts we are using. And yeah, being emotional is a big part of that. It is a big drive for that.
Yeah, I do get emotional, like a lot. It wasn't, there was something, this is my favorite quote, something like James Baldwin said. He said, everyone you look at is also you. So that, like, it just is like empathy that like is like the main focus for me too. And also recognizing that I didn't, until I came into this lab, I didn't really understand this gravity. I didn't understand, like, this affects everyone too. And just also because of like my background, and I think like how important it is to just have that solidarity amongst people. It's very mind-boggling. I just started doing this work for the lab, and it just I'm going to hopefully be a medical student. Yeah. Let's see if I make it. Yeah, and Arya too, and she's going into dental school. And that's something, that emotional sense is something like from this lab that we're going to carry and hopefully like see in the patients that we treat, and we hopefully want to like fully understand their context and while we treat them too. So yeah, the emotional aspect is crazy. Yeah, again, on this emotional aspect, I remember when I first heard about the project, it was just in one of my gen eds. So it was a brief, like 20-minute lesson. And it truly had stuck with me that day. I went home, I called my mom, I was like, I heard about this. And then I did more research. And again, on this touch on emotion as people who are aspiring to one day take care of other people. And again, coming from, again, considering my background, it's important to realize that like you said, we're going to be people that look just like us. And we had a conversation with current M1s, which are medical students, and we had asked them what their touch was with this project as students at VCU on MCV's campus who are doing anatomical labs in their first year. And it was really surprising to learn that they had heard about this project for just an hour during their orientation. So as they're going to these anatomical labs, they actually hadn't incorporated any of these practices that honoring the bodies before they touch them in any kind of procurement or experimentational processes. I think it's really important as someone who's very science-based. This project has opened my eyes so much to the fact that these are people. These are not just cells and everything that I want it to be on a scientific level. But you're talking to these people, you're connecting with these people, and the only way that you can hopefully one day be able to treat them and connect with them is to understand where they come from. So I feel like that's the big, again, emotion is necessary here.
I feel better about the project.
Any more questions, comments?
I just have one question about the Texas. What year was that for the Texas school? The year? Yeah, what year was that? It was in the last 5 years. Okay, with 2020 and 2022.
You ladies are certainly to be commended on the great work that you're doing. I work with seniors, people who are turning 65 and 70s and 80s. And what I'm finding is that I'll ask them, well, what's going to happen at the end? I'm finding that many of primarily the Caucasian people say, oh, our bodies are going to be donated to science. But it's very rare that you hear someone of African descent say that they've made the conscious decision to donate their bodies to science. So what I'm reminded of as I listen to your work is there still is that distrust, even when it comes to organ donor, that whole organ donor campaign around the state. So I feel that the state is making a big emphasis for people to donate and the importance of donating organs, then there should not be a hard press to have that legislation that you mentioned where, what did you call it? Where it's outlawed to collect unclaimed bodies. I mean, but to me, they kind of go hand in hand somehow. And so I don't think I have a question, but I'm just sitting here thinking about the fact that most African Americans still have a distrust. I'm not sure if I want to donate. If I want to be an organ donor, maybe they're going to come and get my heart. So it's still relevant, and it's still real, and it's something that we don't talk about. So I want to again commend you for the work that you're doing. Because
I want to speak to that real quick. I know what it is.
It's like, I'm African American, I give up my organs, it's gonna go to a white person. I've heard that many times, and of course, my very superstitious mother.
Whole body snatcher thing that you guys showed in there. If I decide I'm gonna put on 61, I'm gonna donate my organs, they may come and get me, because there's so much information out there, they'll come and get my body. Again, it may not make sense to some, ethnic groups, but clearly it's a reality for African Americans based on the history that you have disclosed. So again, thank you.
I saw that probably all wanted to comment.
I just wanted to say, based off you guys' points, I grew up that way too. Front row right here, my partner, he's someone who has organ donor on his ID. When I found out, I had the ballistic, because for me, growing up, I heard, I was born in Henrico Hospital. I was raised in Churchill. They're nowhere near close. No one in my family is born in MCV. It's either, born at home by a midwife, or you go to another hospital, St. Mary's or one of the other hospitals. So for us, I feel like the concept of organ donation and Black people having that medical mistrust goes down to the bare minimum, the level of autonomy, which is stripped away. And that's what we're here to do, is to try to make sure we can rectify some of those relationships to, hey, if you are a Black person and potentially want to donate, maybe it'll be safe, it'll happen exactly the way you want it to be. But for right now, we have a lot more work on our end to make sure that we rectify a lot of the mistrust and abuse that has gone on when it comes to the illegal procurement of those bodies. But also trying to make sure that the Black community understands and reemphasizes that level of autonomy that they have. Personally, I've never heard a Black person, in my opinion, tell me they want to donate their body to science. But we are in museums, kept alive in casings to be displayed. So for us, it's time to give, I feel like power back to the Black body. You decide how you want to, die. And it's unfortunate that in these cases, our ancestors weren't given that. So for us, I feel like having these specific conversations, trying to make sure we understand the systemic issues that are at hand. We can't change the world in a day, but understanding and trying to understand those aspects that we can change and try to, manipulate to make it positive for us is exactly where we need to start. But I do feel like for us, we want to have a greater and larger scale of change, because for us, it's every day. This isn't an issue that people, for us, like this East Marshall Street, some people, like we said, we carry this on for our class, right? But we carry it to our next, course or our next, event. But for us who have lived in this life, it's something that is on the forefront of every, day is in the forefront of our mind every single time that we, think about going to the doctor. There's a reason why there's called a lab coat syndrome. Every time you go to the doctor, your specific type of, community, you may have a higher level of blood pressure because of the fact that being in those institutions and those spaces are historically, unsafe for you. So I do think that it's important for us to talk about the levels in which our families have been wronged, the levels in which our community deserves to advocate for us. But it's also for us to understand we deserve the autonomy for our own bodies, and doing this research is a part of that.
That was beautifully said. And I think part of the conversation here, as Camille mentioned, is the present day health inequities and the lack of confidence in the healthcare system, right? I'll be honest with you, anecdotally, right? My father was just in the hospital. He's about to hit 80, right? And I know full and well, from experience, right, that if I was not there, it's unclear what would happen, right? And so, and this is me, right? I have a PhD, all the things, right? Doesn't matter, right? And so, as there's an understanding among, African Americans that you need that family member there, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen in life. Right. I think that goes to your question, right, or your comment, because if I can't receive that level of respect and trust in the healthcare system in life, what do I think is going to happen in death, right? To my body and my remains. I actually had a conversation. We had an event at the Black History Museum where we really, discussed health equities in the past and the present, dealing with the East-West Street Well Project. Some of our fellows presented, and I actually had a member of the clergy come speak to me afterward. He actually works for the hospital at Virginia Commonwealth University's hospital, right, MCV, and he actually he's tasked with having those conversations about organ donation. And he was communicating to me that is a struggle with Black folks having that conversation. And we were discussing this, and I think part of what we need to acknowledge is that those apprehensions are historical, but also, as Camilla mentioned, right, they're connected to the present, right? That distrust of healthcare, and making it so that it's understandable that Black folks aren't just superstitious or paranoid, right? Acknowledging that is really important to have that conversation. Not to sort of discount it. I think media discounts things, gives the sense that Black folks are just, paranoid or not being logical. But there is a logical basis to this. I mean, that Texas example gives us one instance, but there's a larger conversation about health inequities when it relates to people of African descent. And that really, I think, speaks to this lack of confidence of having that respect and in death that clearly is being denied in life, right? And when there are family members there, right? And so I think this is all connected into a larger conversation what's going on in the present. And we need to really see this as a holistic problem that requires a holistic solution.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to share, my mother was born at St. Philip's and survived. Although I think my grandmother must have gotten one of those Mississippi appendectomies because she never had any other children. And I was born at MCV and survived, so okay, there's that. My brother about 5 years ago had a medical emergency and was declared brain dead. After he'd been in the hospital a couple of days. He also was an organ donor. And I remember in front of my mother, nurses came into the room and they were literally like in a celebratory mood. In front of my mom, that was really hard to see. And we had to talk with them about that. Like, okay, yeah, he's an organ donor, but like, are you really, we were thinking they were keeping him alive technically because he might wake up. But that's not what they were doing. They were saving, waiting for whatever they need to do before his organs were harvested. And that was just 5 years ago. And that left a big scar on my mother and and we were all there. There were like 10 of us there. So, these things actually are, real today. Yeah.
First of all, excellent job, ladies. This is amazing research, and thank you for what you're doing, sir. There's an elephant in the room we had touched on. And that is, there is a Black market value on Black organs. Okay, our organs perform differently based on breeding. We're just gonna say it. I know Jimmy the Greek got in trouble for saying this in the 80s. But the reality is that there is a market for the organs of Black people on the Black market. And so that is a thing that is not widely talked about, but it's also a reason why you got so upset by the organ donor thing. As someone, y'all beat me to the punch, because when I first got my license, years ago, I had organ donor up there. I told them, yeah, I'll check the box, sure. And then I had a conversation with somebody. I was like, look, brother, take it off your license. Because if you get into a problem, they're not going to save you. Let your family make that decision. And he broke down all the things, and I'm like, oh my God. And so it forced me to look at it like, so I've done that to other people. Like, look, you might be savable. So let your family make that decision. Don't leave it in somebody else's hands. And that is a really pessimistic way to look at it, and very steep in reality. Very steep in reality. And so when you show the Texas slide in 2022, I'm like, of course. Yeah, of course. There's the young brother that they found at the school wrapped up in the mat, and his organs were gone. This was like several years ago, young high school student. But they tried to tell us that he killed himself at school, but his organs are missing. So when you have this kind of background, and Tuskegee, and the fact that certain communities near Army bases, they were testing things out in the Black community. People will say that you're crazy, but the reality is there is data. So I'm glad you're doing this work. It sheds light on this as an issue, but it also, and I'll say the last thing, we do carry trauma from generation. So the trauma passed down for these things, that's part of why this is just ingrained in us. Sometimes people don't have to teach you this. It's just one of those things, because it's in you. But we still carry some of that trauma from plantation life that just shows up in how we operate. And so this will be no different, this lab coat syndrome. So yeah, this great work. Please continue to put it out there so people can see it and learn.
Anything else? We have a few more minutes. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you.
Yeah, again, on this topic of organ donation, it's important to recognize that healthcare does not just span going to the doctor. It spans going to the dentist as well. So I'm currently on another project where we're kind of taking a systematic look into dental textbooks. So again, all of this knowledge begins in the classroom, where students are being taught who they're being taught by. And in this systematic review, we've started all the way with materials from the 1800s, and I think we've hit up to like 2022. And we found that among these materials, among the images that are depicted, those of which are of unhealthy tissues, unhealthy gums, any kind of disease conditions, they're only of people of ethnic backgrounds. So any kind of light pink tissue, that of which is like typically described or is assumed to be of a Caucasian, will only depict healthy gingival tissue, any kind of good condition. But if you present something like midline diastema, which is a gap tooth at the front, that will only belong to someone with dark purple melanated gums, or again, just any kind of disease condition. So it's really important to note that among this kind of systematic review, we found that almost all research that's been done has only been done on people with light pink tissues. So as we've talked about here, all the science that has been done on these minoritized communities for their benefit, but in other fields, it's a complete lack of. Therefore, like, we're only looking at them because there's something wrong. And there's nothing being done to kind of perceive that. That's what's wrong. And we're gonna test it out on someone with light pink melanated tissue, or just kind of seeing the difference between those two. So I think it's important to recognize that as well, in addition to what we've been talking about.
And if you guys are interested in getting in contact with our research or hearing more about us, we have a website. I wish we had the QR code, but we do have a website. I can't remember I don't know the URL, but East March Street Well Project, VCU, check us out. Thank you.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Okay, awesome. One more round of applause for the panelists. Everybody done.